that could be as large as Bitcoin or Ethereum, right, on one end of the scale. So that's an open network DAO, where you have individuals committing nodes and being rewarded in block rewards. Or it could be as more intimate and small as like a metacartel or a Moloch, right? Which is completely permissioned and walled off, and kind of, it's kind of like a membership club more than it is a DAO in a lot of ways, in that it is a group of individuals who are deciding who they are allowing into their group.
Layer 1 is a podcast and community dedicated to helping you master all things crypto. We'll be bringing you the best interviews with project executives, technical analysis for trading of the most popular cryptocurrencies, and insight into what's actually happening behind the scenes.
As you join us each episode, you're going to hear about tokens, fundraisers, investments, and even crypto conspiracies. But please remember that nothing we say should be considered financial or legal advice.
Come join us on this journey, and welcome to Layer 1. Good morning, good evening, good night. It is another episode of Layer 1. Shout out to our lads community that we have following us, as well as everyone out there that's been listening and following the channel for a little while here. We appreciate you having us into your day. I do have a good guest. We do have a great episode to get to. I have James Duncan. He is the co-founder of Abridged. We're going to talk a lot of things DAOs. We're going to talk community building. We're going to talk friction, adoption, Ethereum. There's going to be a ton of topics that we're going to get to. But before we get to all that, James, how are you doing today?
I'm doing super well. And yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to dig in.
Yeah, absolutely, man. When I was doing some, pre-episode research, I saw that you had a pretty vibrant background. Maybe that wasn't even tech related that I want to get into. So let's start with that background. Let's start with maybe, I think it's Earth and Planetary Science. You had that degree in, and I wonder how you took that and kind of made your way into tech. But just give me the full background on James.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question, and it is a bit of a strange route. But I was studying earth science, and I'm from Oklahoma. Was planning to likely go back to Oklahoma at some point, and throughout that experience in college, I loved learning physically as well, and like experimenting with my hands and actually being able to observe what's going on. Right. And like earth science gives you that opportunity to like go and travel to places to actually like study rocks, essentially, which I was really excited about.
Yeah.
And that gave me a lot of exposure both in earth history as well as climate systems. And I also got an opportunity to practice a lot of analysis through CAD programs and advanced software, which honestly does help me today in a lot of the no code stuff that we're doing, which is interesting. But my path after earth science went into clean energy, and was really studying clean energy and renewable energy. And this idea of a decentralized electric grid came on my radar. And that expanded into a bit of an obsession with blockchain and crypto and hyper efficient localized economies. And at some point, I read the book Zero Marginal Cost Society in late 2017. And then in early 2018, I was, shooting my resume around, looking for work in tech, finding this, trying to crack this nut that seemed quite impenetrable, because it's like, it's kind of a hard thing, figuring out like what is your in tech. And I don't have any
coding background
experience. I don't have coding background. I know people, I have friends from tech, but my family is unfamiliar with it. Right. I'm from Oklahoma, right. Which is not a very techie sort of place, I would say. And, at some point, I came up, I was looking at different opportunities and came across one that I was honestly most excited about. And that was working at the Ethereum Foundation. And John Choi and the team there, took a chance and brought me in and helped me manage the grants program there, which was a really, just a really wild opportunity, honestly.
Yeah, take me through how you kind of got that opportunity with EF. Did you just kind of cold call people that were on the foundation, and maybe they kind of responded and said, "Hey, we'll give you a shot"? How did you get that initial kind of chance with EF?
Totally. And yeah, and it was honestly, it was due to a connection from college. And so I knew someone, and he was looking for, someone to come in and help and be an operational sort of workhorse. And I was extremely eager and had literally been spending 8 hours a day outside of work, like just studying white papers, trying to make sense of this new technology.
Mm.
And so that was kind of the transition there.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody knows if you don't have any coding experience, you have to start your own podcast. That's like the number one thing you have to do. I'm just kidding. But so
No, absolutely.
you're at Ethereum grants program. How long were you there, and kind of take us through the processes that you guys were going through there. I don't know how many people in the Ethereum community, certainly outside of that Ethereum community, know kind of what goes on the inner workings of the Ethereum Foundation. So if you can kind of give me maybe a backstage view of what's going on, as well as kind of how that led you to Abridged and how that helps you today.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at the height of 2018, there was, it was like the big pump just happened. There was capital that was in the bank, and the goal was to, utilize this opportunity to get more teams building on Ethereum. And I think that during my time there, that's exactly kind of what happened. We started funding all of the major clients for ETH 2.0. We funded most of the existing state channels in layer 2 solutions today. We also had a lot of different a few different wallets that were funded from the Ethereum Foundation grants program, as well as different community and education initiatives. And really just kind of, I think the idea was really to invigorate the ecosystem and kind of get people moving and get people working. And it was, I think like coming from a non-technical background and then jumping into that side of things, it was totally like one of the most challenging educational experiences, both working, going from a local work situation to a completely remote and across like multiple countries or time zones on a daily basis, and coordinating internationally was definitely some of the things that I really like took and continue to use today within Abridged. And then also just really digging in and appreciating the strategy that Vitalik and the leaders of the EF and the Ethereum community were taking in creating a global community through things like the ETH Global and the ETH hackathon events, where I think really today you really see that there are pockets of a mecca sort of places like Silicon Valley also obviously has a lot of advantages as far as the way that they develop software, but really Ethereum is quite global in its community and really does have a like really significant effort of individuals who are really inspired and passionate to kind of contribute their time, whether it's part-time or full-time, to the project and developing the protocol.
So let's get into Abridged. But before we kind of like go deep on the actual company, the platform, I want to have this conversation about DAOs and community building, right? And I think they might be two separate conversations. So maybe break it into those two parts and kind of give me your experience building communities. Maybe even after the time that you were at the Ethereum Foundation, why is it important that we use DAOs to build communities? What will the future look like with all of these DAOs and hyper local organizations? I love that term that you used. So kind of break that all down for me before we hop into Abridged.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think this comes down, and I'll kind of like explain my thinking of how DAOs even function, or what this kind of range of how you define a DAO, because I think it's a concept that a lot of people have different ideas about and you can take in different ways. But I think that I also think that Vitalik in a lot of ways is a greater community builder even than maybe he is a developer or a mathematician. His thing that he's created with Ethereum has been an amazing community, and you can see that in things like State of Crypto that IDEO and a few others have published, that you can see like there's orders of magnitude more development happening in Ethereum because of that community that he's created. And I think really the core of everything that we're discussing here is discussing how individual agents come together to participate in a specific network or a specific goal and purpose. And a DAO I think you can take a DAO and you can describe a DAO as any sort of, these like network of agents that are moving toward a similar purpose or incentivized to do something collectively. And that could be as large as Bitcoin or Ethereum, right, on one end of the scale. So that's an open network DAO, where you have individuals committing nodes and being rewarded in block rewards. Or it could be as more intimate and small as like a metacartel or a Moloch, right, which is completely permissioned and walled off, and kind of, it's kind of like a membership club more than it is a DAO in a lot of ways, in that it is a group of individuals who are deciding who they are allowing into their group, and by what permission. And in the future, I think it becomes a lot more flexible, and there's tons of shades of gray between that range. And I think that ultimately the things that I'm really excited about seeing are these token networks that are being leveraged in more of a social way. Today, you see a lot of, tokens are essentially the main use case is financial arbitrage, but there's not a lot of social value in owning tokens, although there should be, because it is a form of identity. It's a form of representation of what you are participating in, and part of the network that you're involved with. So there should be privileges associated with that. And that's the thing that I'm like quite excited to dig into, and happy to kind of dig into more use cases there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be my next question. We've seen Roll kind of come out with these personal tokens, which I think is taking exactly what you said and kind of bringing it to fruition. So what other types of DAOs, maybe for those who don't know about the communities that lie within kind of this DAO ecosystem, this vibrant DAO ecosystem, but also nascent, right? What are some of these DAOs that you see in use cases that they use that are doing this DAO mechanic well?
Yeah, sure. So I think the one that I've been participating in most, and like we helped start, was the Metacartel. And I think that they have done an amazing job at creating this social culture that is equally committed and incentivized to kind of like benefit from each other. And then that's one specific example, and then you can see another example in like Compound, for instance. And Compound has done a really interesting they've done a great job in that they went from a corporate entity into a distributed tokenized entity, and it's a bigger financial play than it is in a social play in some ways, right, from that front. But I think in the future, it will be really fascinating to see that continue to develop and become a representation of like how they're making the protocol decisions. And you can see that also in MakerDAO today, where Maker is the MKR holders are deciding on decisions within their protocol, and they're probably the longest standing proper sort of voting DAO in the ecosystem or something like that. And I think they're definitely benefited in a variety of ways, as far as like getting more people involved and having a larger mind share in how to make decisions. But then they also have a lot of hurdles to kind of get overcome in order to be more efficient. And then also a more like simple, to like bring it back to like a very simple iteration of what a DAO could be, is we're working with like Spencer Noon. He has a crypto AMA, and very simply, he's distributing tokens to people who are participating. And so it's a very simple token distribution, like participation incentive system that will eventually become a way to like, you can actually then create value through those tokens. You can, there's all sorts of possibilities that you can develop once you do get a tokenized network moving.
Yeah, so you guys have built Abridged, which is essentially giving community managers the ability to kind of leverage DAOs for their community. So I kind of want to jump into what Abridged is doing. I think you guys, when you go to your website, there's a ton of statements saying, "Hey, we need to make a frictionless system when it comes to DAOs, so that we can offer this to many people, not just people who can code and can write Telegram bots and all of these different things."
Mhm.
So what are you guys specifically doing at Abridged, and how does that help? Maybe lower the friction for DAOs for those that aren't familiar with them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, we began as a tooling company to empower anyone to build the next killer dApp. And the framework that James Young has developed, who I think he, through his experience like launching payment channels at Moloch, the first TCR at Ad Token or Ad Chain, and then the first Moloch DAO, the Moloch DAO contract, creating all of these things that's culminated into him creating a system that is really focused on onboarding and scalability. And we've been finding that we need a better way to distribute these applications. So we integrate and then need to distribute. And this is the core of what the usability is for what Abridged offers in the DAO ecosystem today. And we also kind of are taking a bet on DAOs as being that social, the application that has more explosive social growth than say a lot of the DeFi systems that you have today, because there's only so many people that are interested in financial arbitrage ultimately. But there are a lot of people who are interested in Kim Kardashian, for instance, or something.
Yeah.
If like there's like certain social aspects that people are more deeply social than they are maybe financially inclined. And so this has led us to develop this system of DAO Ops. And DAO Ops describes kind of the way that we've been building in Web3 functionality into Web2 interfaces. And that's the first step that we've taken in terms of making things more usable. And so it's using our SDK, our lower level tech, to provide an account extremely easily, no username or password. It's just essentially you hit start with a bot, and then you have an Ethereum address, right? And then on top of that, we have a relayer system, and we're integrating with layer 2 systems in order to provide a more seamless transaction experience, which we did finally integrate at our first mainnet DAO just in May. And it was built for COVID relief, right? It was using an Aragon framework on the back end. And we were like super stoked. We're like, this is, you could onboard with Wire. You could probably onboard in like less than 10 minutes, which was much faster than any other DAO contract available. But then once you are onboarded, and like even as like the creator of the thing who like was in love with it, it was still extremely expensive, and gas costs started, pumping.
Yep.
And like every time I had to vote, I was
Yep.
spending like 50 cents or $1. And I was like, this is really, it feels wasteful. It's unfortunate because the system is meant to be more efficient, but it ended up, we found this like really serious hurdle. And so at this point, we're now experimenting with a few other options to reduce that friction and allow for like an extremely efficient DAO ecosystem to develop within these social interfaces. So you both have the population as well as the ability and the ease of use to make that happen.
Yeah, I want to talk about the meta transactions and the state channels that you've set up to kind of tackle this, because I joined MetaClan, which is that esports DAO set up by Cooper Turley, and I
Nice.
noticed right when I was involved in the DAO was that when someone needed to join after me, after I was a member, I could vote on said person. But it's like, I'm going to spend $2 to talk about this random person joining the DAO. It's just, and not to mention on other more important maybe initiatives that are going on within the DAO. It's like now I'm spending money, and that's a huge friction point for my activity at least, and I'm sure for other people. So what are you guys doing specifically? You touched on those tools, but what are you guys doing specifically to handle some of these main friction points?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few layers to it, and depending, we're right now we're still implementing based on the community's needs. So some communities may not even need an on-chain system
Mm.
at first, and we could just kind of distribute tokens via points in a database. And then eventually, once they do decide, like they find a direction, they find a path they want to go down, they want to actually create value with these tokens, they can bring it on chain, and they can distribute them to their token owners relatively easily. The way that we are first scaling, and we're participating in a few hackathons this month, and like the Reddit scaling bake off, because it's kind of like right in our sort of comfort zone of what we should be developing, is that we're starting to see that side chains are probably the way to go as far as decreasing the friction for those on-chain interactions. And so we're looking at XDAI specifically right now, and we're also working with a team called K Channels, which is one of a new state channel implementations that's spun out from Consensus. And so the combination of those two systems, we can build Moloch, we can build Aragon, we can integrate our contracts, and from there allow for a really simple system to work on the side chain. One other piece of this is kind of important, is that transitioning from one network to another is quite challenging, and isn't automated in most key-based systems. And so the one advantage of using our smart contracts is that we are able to automate that system so that the transition is relatively smooth.
Yeah, what do you make of this Reddit community points that have been kind of popping up? I know it was specifically Fortnite and the subreddit cryptocurrency that are kind of rolling out this first beta stage of their community points. What do you make of like that jump by Reddit? And do you think that will be something that goes ahead relatively quickly? Or are we looking at maybe a couple months, maybe a year even before these community points actually become effective for those subreddits?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. I mean, obviously, like Reddit's like 500 million people are on Reddit, something like that. Like this is like as big an opportunity as ever to like actually create a mass adoption sort of event or system. And I think that it'll be really interesting. Like, I don't know, have you been on Reddit and like actually created the vaults and like experienced like what it's like to try and get moons from our crypto? No, yeah.
I have used Karma, obviously, which was their community points prior to that, but no, I haven't done any of the moons or bricks or what have you that are there. So how you've done that?
Yeah, so we've been playing with it a bit, and yeah, we're working on a system that that allows for an interaction with a bot to facilitate a lot of the interactions or the token distributions for inside of a channel. I think there's some iteration to be had in kind of specifying exactly what's going to be most useful for these communities, and each community will have like specific quirks or specific needs that you might want, maybe even like a community DAO for one community, but for another community it might literally just be points for contributions. And the way that you're distributing those points too, there's a lot of sort of opportunity there to kind of iterate and figure out the best means of awarding contributions, or what constitutes a contribution in a specific community based on the moderator's kind of decision making. But yeah, I think I would say by 2021 there should be a relatively robust system set up, whether it's us or someone else who decides to make that happen.
Yeah, I had a conversation with one of the other individuals that I was interviewing. I think it was Zaki from Cosmos, and I was asking him about this DAO setup. It just that our conversation flowed into DAOs for whatever reason, and the question I posed to him is how far down the complexity stack or the I guess individual local communities can we take DAOs, right? Like I know you talked about Ethereum, you talked about a ton of these large organizations, but how far down can you take a DAO? Would there be a DAO set up between me and my buddies that are on a text message? What kind of use cases out there that people maybe haven't seen yet could potentially DAOs take form in the near future?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I think it's really interesting. And I think that, so there's the concept of like this like localized economy and currency for very specific purposes should create higher efficiency, right? Like for instance, there's the US dollar represents a plethora of things. And what goes into the US GDP is essentially what amounts to the US dollar. But if you have a token for specifically electricity, then you can create a market that is completely contained and has a very specific price on that one thing. For a DAO, though, I think it's a good question, and kind of figuring out like how that whole ecosystem is going to work is definitely an emergent thing, and I'm not sure that anyone has like the perfect vision for how it will happen. But I do think that, to your point, there will definitely be these smaller clubs of friends who are just hanging out, and maybe they just want to have a like road trip DAO, and they're just going to like pool their money together, and it's a little bit more of an advanced system than maybe Venmo. And it has like some sort of accounting ease of accounting system involved with it. You might also have like PTOs that become these little DAO systems, or HOAs, and then you could also see on a larger scale, like Greta Thunberg creating a carbon emissions fund or something like that, where she wants to create a resource that she can help administer or point the community in a way that's bringing all these like really intelligent people together to kind of solve something that they're passionate about.
Yeah, I love the implementation of DAOs possibly into these communities that are being built on the internet today. I think as we see content move more towards that hyper local situation where you have streamers, you've got channels on YouTube, as opposed to having these big kind of monolithic content TV channels or things like that, DAOs fit in perfectly if we can solve the friction points that you talked about. I think that's a great point. Could you touch on that social liquidity pool aspect a little bit more? Because I think that's probably the coolest feature to me. I think the ability to say, I've got 5 friends or maybe 5 colleagues, and we are able to pool our liquidity together. I think Moloch did this really well initially, right? They were able to get some large portion of funds together and put them into a smart contract, handle it via some type of governance, and now they're able to fund different initiatives that they see fit. So if you could touch on that socialized liquidity pool, and then see where that kind of goes down the rabbit hole here in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, and I guess like the socialized community pools, it sounds like the community banking system kind of is maybe also a way to think about like a Moloch specifically. It's a permissioned system that has some sort of stated purpose that brings people together, and they're incentivized to participate largely because they have skin in the game. So they're literally putting up capital to be a part of this. And you can see that too in a lot of different social clubs throughout history for why the participants are cooperating together. Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting whenever you start to see sort of decentralized nonprofits, maybe like the Greta Thunberg example that I brought up earlier, where you have a global way to crowdfund for a specific cause. And instead of maybe Moloch, who's promoting ETH 2.0, it becomes a community fund for global warming, right? Another thing that I find interesting about these new liquidity pools are from projects like Roll, where every community person who has a social token they're issuing, anyone who's a part of that network is now participating in the value growth of that network, and it's in their benefit to grow that value, right? So I'm not only purchasing Alex token or purchasing Ja Rule token, but I want that token to be purchased by other people, and I want to find opportunities for more people to get involved with that. And I think that something that will be really interesting will be when these token holders or these token issuers start collateralizing their tokens with each other's networks. And so then you have like a token partnership, right? And then DAOs can actually participate in the growth of each other's networks in a way that's it's like a decentralized a joint venture of some sort, right? It's like a crypto version of like incentive aligned token, these systems.
Yeah, it's interesting to see these token ecosystems kind of grow, and incentivizing activity is definitely something we've seen not only in the DeFi space. I think that we've seen a lot of subsidized activity there, but also in the NFT space that I've kind of grown fond of. You see a lot of incentivizing and kind of having skin in the game with what you're talking about, where you're kind of not only contributing to a community, but you're getting contribution back for that activity. So definitely like to see that, man. I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but I always, we're in the U.S. We got to talk regulation. You brought up these
Mhm.
personal tokens, which, I have a talk with Sid on Wednesday because we're planning on looking at a layer one token, a LADS token as well. That
Nice.
should be
Yeah.
interesting. But I'm definitely going to have the regulation talk with him. So I want to hear, from your perspective, do you see DAOs kind of running up against some sort of regulation in the future? Is there kind
Mm.
of a give and take here, or what do you make of regulation as far as it comes to DAOs?
Yeah, that is a great, really great question, and something that I've, definitely been thought about quite a lot through my work. And I think the Meta Cartel originally was like, the goal for it. It was an application layer DAO, right? So we wanted to not only give grants but also create a revenue generating system.
Mm.
And so from that, I was digging into what that looked like from a regulatory standpoint. At what point are we really in sort of like hot water? And it's pretty interesting because I think with a lot of regulation, and just with like legals in general, and like learning about the legal system, is that there's so much gray area that it is not cut and dry. And most lawyers will give you a very a straight opinion, I think. But the truth is that if there's no precedent, it's really hard to say. And so with these like social token economies, I think like I remember hearing Bradley say something about how, if as long as they're sort of more rewards driven and sort of more like a discount token for a brand, you can kind of like skate past regulation if that's like the sort of core narrative behind it. But then, you also have Alex Masmesh, who sold himself as an, ISA, right? And that for some people are like very, very clearly that's like that's a security token, right? um, but I do think that there's definitely there's a lot of different strategies to kind of creating a legal defense, and in a lot of ways it's kind of to some extent it's about how decentralized the network is, right? And I think like with some of these decisions that the SEC came out with, like with tron and EOS, I believe, I forget which case specifically, but they did state something along the lines of you have 3 years to fully decentralize your network, and once it's sufficiently decentralized, you're good to go, because they don't consider Bitcoin and Ethereum securities, which that has been stated, right?
Mm.
And so I think to some extent, if you do get your token out in enough hands within 3 years, you might be sort of in the clear. But that's not legal advice, obviously.
Yeah, never legal advice on this channel. I think the
Yeah.
size and scale of the DAOs in each specific DAO definitely has something to play into there too, right? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a Chinese proverb, but it was something like pigs eat, hogs get slaughtered, and I think that makes sense for Ton. EOS, these guys are raising billions of dollars, and no wonder that there's kind of a red, little mark on their back for the SEC to go after. And it's super funny because our space moves so fast that as the SEC or IRS even just begins to hear about DeFi, it's like, oh no, we're doing these personal token thing now. We're doing this DAO thing. So how do they ever keep up? So definitely
So true.
yeah, definitely a lot of good insight there, and I appreciate you kind of easing my worries on that front. I do have a couple more questions about community growth.
Mhm.
I think Peter. I was listening to Peter's podcast, or what did he say? DAOs are not a
DAOs, yeah,
DAOs are not a tech issue,
tech issue.
they're a
Hmm.
community issue. And I think that states it perfectly. People think they implement a DAO and now all of these people are going to flock to their community, and it's just not the case. So I'm interested on your thoughts on community building. Obviously, you have that background with the Ethereum grants program. So just break down maybe your principles on community building. I love to hear that, just, as it relates to layer one
Hmm.
almost. I would love to take some of those insights.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, and yeah, and I think community building, like, I think I'm a very social sort of creature, and I love being a part of a bunch of people, and I love like getting that, there's people excited and intrinsically motivated to be together. I think that's kind of the core of it. Um, and I think that on community building online, there's a particular type of building there, and I think, taking lessons from like World of Warcraft is probably, that's like the most advanced like online community system out there
Guilds.
today, because there's, oh yeah, guilds, like people have spent decades of their lives in that game, like not even, like literally decades. And the amount of cumulative knowledge, that's kind of what the core of this community idea is that you have a bunch of people who have a shared perspective and view of the world. And I what I've been talking about with James Young, my co-founder, for instance, is this idea of concentric circles, where you have a integration process where you have, people on the periphery, they want to participate, they're kind of like finding their way in, and then you have that inner circle, and you may have like something like within that inside of it, which is kind of how we envision some of these token sales to go into the future. So you have like an open network that some people can participate in, but then you have like a Moloch style permission DAO in the middle that allows for some people to come in and actually vote on the protocol, rather than having a permissionless focal point of like decision making.
Let's talk on Collab.Land before we finish up with a couple other thoughts. How does Collab.Land kind of synergize with Abridged, and how are you helping people build communities with that tool?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, as I described prior, Abridged is the technology underneath it powers Collab.Land, and Collab.Land is our consumer side, our consumer facing product. And the first kind of consumer facing, we've been working with devs. Now we're kind of looking at consumers and building for early adopters and users, which is really exciting and invigorating, because we have quite a bit of inbound and actually are able to communicate to a customer and create this abstract kind of creative thing that's serving their needs. But I do think a lot of it does come back to that community building in those concentric circles. And a token is a representation of ownership of a specific community. And it's like you're wearing a jersey now, And so what what the point is to allow for automation of processes to distribute those like tokens or that community, and also then to permission access and give exclusive opportunities for those community members to, very simply, like the first iteration is create a membership system within like chat interfaces, within like Telegram and Discord and even, Reddit, to allow for people of a certain token threshold to participate in the broader community discussion. Maybe if you have like, you're like an admin or you're an elite, community member, there's like a elite members, there's like a smaller discussion happening above that or something like that. And in a lot of ways, it facilitates these sort of it really invigorates token economies and facilitates that sort of concentric circle hierarchy, those kinds of systems for a community.
Yeah, I could see this concentric circle idea play out on applications like Discord. I think Discord has a great setup. Although, as we build out layer one, it seems to have a higher friction point than a lot of people are ready for when it comes to kind of joining. I think throwing in a Telegram link is a lot easier for some people. I think more people maybe use Telegram. So while I like the interface of Discord, I just appreciate Telegram a little bit more. I think it's a little bit more accessible. So how does that synergy or I guess the integration of Collab.Land look in those different platforms? I just want to know from like a user perspective, what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes sense. And I think your point too, like, it feels to me like Telegram's always been a great starting point for communities, because it is a little friction. It's a little more frictionless. There's less noise, fewer channels to like be confused by, mainly. But I do think that Discord does have like more functionality. It has that like open chat channel and things like that. And you're right. And whenever we're building these systems, there are different functions within these different interfaces. And Discord, like for our membership system, for instance, the token permissioned chat room. So with Telegram, it's relatively simple. You have a bot. You will throw up your token contract, and then your amount of token that you want to verify within each user. The bot will verify that user prior to giving them access to the chat room. And that's just, it's like a doorman, right? It's like, hey, are you on the list, right? With Discord, it's a bit different where because of the roles system that they have, and different roles have different access to chat rooms already. So they already have this hierarchy structure involved in that tool. We're using that, and the bot is then verifying your role and giving you a role based on the amount of tokens that you own. And so, if you have it could be even a combination of tokens or the certain amount of community tokens. So if you have 10 lads, maybe you're just like a new member and you want to get into the group, there's like a big open channel. But if you have 100 or 1,000 lads, you've been contributing to the community a lot. You get access to the community owners channel or something like that. You get upgraded into Paladin or whatever your role permissions are.
Yeah, I wonder when I was kind of looking at what you guys are doing and how so you guys aren't creating the tokens, obviously. It kind of meshes with what Roll is doing, essentially, where they're creating the personal tokens and maybe you can use those tokens within Collab.Land.
Right. Yeah. So we are optimizing our tools to be helpful for any token issuer.
Got
So
it.
anyone who already has a network, because we don't see very many other opportunities to use tokens today that sort of offer this kind of functionality.
So I wonder how you deal with someone maybe saying going to Uniswap or going to these tokens that are on secondary market, maybe buying a ton of these tokens, not getting the activity or not doing the activity that was rewarded. Maybe it's coming from someone who's got a super large, maybe they're a whale within a community and they're just selling the tokens. Is that just kind of a emergent problem that's coming along due to that?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I'd say it's all sort of emergent design. And it's definitely working within each community. And pretty soon, actually, we will have our first community that's has a chat room within Telegram, but then the tokens are available on Uniswap. And at the same time, those tokens will be distributed by admin to like reward contributions to the network, reward helping each other in this sort of professional network. And there's there's high chance of plutocracy for these kinds of systems that are using markets to make to set the value and set the distribution for those tokens. But then I think a lot of that comes down to the token issuer and working with them specifically and making sure that our systems are benefiting their network and creating the system that they envision rather than leave it vulnerable to such attacks.
Yeah, definitely. And this has been a great discussion on DAOs, man. I appreciate you kind of coming on the channel here. I wanted to know, outside of DAOs, what other
Mhm.
things maybe interest you in the crypto community? I think we touched on a lot about community growth and what's happening with the evolution of DAOs, but what other things within kind of the crypto universe interest you?
Sure. Yeah. I'm super interested about the gaming side of things right now. I mean, obviously, I'm also interested in like Grid Plus. I think Grid Plus, as far as like what brought me into the ecosystem was that energy connection, right? And I think Grid Plus is probably the the horse to bet on in that race because of I just believe in their team, and I think they're really taking the right strategy.
I haven't
But
heard of Grid Plus. Break
oh,
that down for
really?
me. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
cool.
ignorant on it.
Sweet, yeah, no worries. So, so there's a few teams, right? There's like LO3, there's Energy Web Foundation, there may be a few others, but then there's Grid Plus, and these are all tokenized energy, distribution networks that want to facilitate this peer-to-peer energy trading system in market. Grid Plus, the reason that I like them is because they're in Texas, which is a deregulated energy market, and they're able to actually already sell wholesale priced energy through token transactions because they're an energy energy provider for a region within Texas. And so they're taking the idea and just implementing it in a very local economy that actually the regulations allow for it to happen. And they're also, it's funny, like they've taken a few other angles too with like hardware, and they've really focused on user experience for that token ownership and management of the system to actually make it more accessible for these, people who are participating in their network to actually do so in a way that's intuitive to them rather than is, like friction and stress inducing.
Is that network B2B, or are we talking B2C, where the person maybe buys something that business holds and now they have some type of token ownership?
That's right. It's B2C. So
Okay.
Grid Plus is actually making the market and purchasing wholesale electricity and then selling it to their customers.
Got it. Okay. Awesome, man. Well, that's great. I think we had a great conversation here about DAOs. I think the last question, I think I had one more question before we get to the book recommendation that we always do.
Yeah.
Obviously with your, geology background or your, earth science background, what do you make of, I know there's a huge debate, what do you make of kind of the human influence on the earth as we see it today? And what do you make on kind of, I don't want to use the hot term global warming, but you get my meaning. What do you make of kind of humans' influence on our planet today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I studied geology, so earth history, and ultimately we haven't been around for very long. But I also was able to study climate science, and the amount of information and data that we need to collect in order to really understand what's going on is monumental. And it's really challenging actually to predict when climate events will happen. But I think that it is extremely clear that we are not in a great position right now. And like the goal and the things that really need to happen is a global cooperative network and much more global cooperation. Things like the Paris Agreement in 2012, which now is kind of fallen apart, which is unfortunate. But I think we are in a pretty tough position, and I think it's easy to be cynical about the future. But I do think that a lot of the things that are happening within crypto are actually can be applied in ways that will be really meaningful as far as like creating more efficient markets. And really, I think that it will require human behavioral change on a local level in order for us to overcome this global like serious issue.
Great discussion. I want to get a book recommendation for you. It could be crypto, non-crypto. You let me know. What's a book recommendation for those people out there?
So if you haven't read The Road by Cormac McCarthy, this is a book about survival. And so this is relatively unrelated, but it is about survival. It's about human connection, and it's an uplift. It's an empowering book. I wouldn't say it's uplifting, it's empowering. It's a book about a father and son's relationship during the apocalypse. And I think it's something that I find to be really moving and just and sort of like a fascinating world to kind of dive into, as to compare to where we are today.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to make that point. Sounds like 2020. So definitely maybe a good book to relate to. Last thing, drop the links where the viewers and listeners can find more about you, as well as Abridged and Collab.Land.
Awesome. Yeah, I sure will. I would say on our Twitter at abridged.io or abridged.io and Collab.Land or Collab.Land would be the two links that you can kind of find everything else that we're doing. And our Medium blog is probably where you can find our most up-to-date information, as well as the Twitter handle.
Awesome, James. This has been a great conversation. I know Layer 1 and the Layer 1 community is going to be implementing some of the things you guys are doing relatively soon. So I cannot wait to kind of mesh with you a little bit more as we go forward, maybe have you back on in 6 months' time, something like that. So I appreciate you today.
Amazing. Would love to. And please sign up to the early access. Would love to get your all's communities involved and help you facilitate more tokenized cooperative systems.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to check out Layer 1 on all the audio and video platforms listed in the description. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next week.